Fight fans, welcome to the PBC Podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Bouhairie and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome, everyone, to the PBC Podcast. I'm Kenneth Bouhairie.
And I'm Michael Rosenthal, editor of USA Today's Boxing Junkie.
Thank you all for tuning in. This week, we've got two-time super middleweight champion Anthony Dirrell and strength and conditioning coach Larry Wade joining us. Now, for those who don't know, Mr. Wade, he has worked with a ton of top fighters, currently working with Caleb Plant, Shawn Porter, Rolando, Romero, Luis Ortiz. The list goes on with this guy, so you do not want to miss what he has to say. We're going to look back at Shakur Stevenson's big win Saturday night. Plus, we'll look ahead to this coming Saturday's PBC on Showtime triple header. And in today's toe-to-toe segment, we're going to list our 5 best performances from Canelo Alvarez. But first, Mike, boxing lost another fight this weekend. The heavyweight bout between Dillian, Whyte, and Otto Wallin, scheduled for October 30th, is off after Wallin suffered a shoulder injury. Mike, what were your thoughts when you heard the news?
Well, it's unfortunate, especially for Wallin, because now we don't know whether he'll ever get this fight. Whyte could get Tyson Fury next. The fight that got canceled might have been Wallin's ticket to a rematch with Fury. Now it's less likely to happen, at least anytime soon. So it's just unfortunate.
Yeah, I was very disappointed, particularly because I thought Wallin was going to win. Also thought the timing was a bit questionable, with the potential Tyson Fury bout on the table for Dillian Whyte. Did the cancellation seem shady to you at all?
I've been thinking about this. I really don't know what to think. There were rumors that Whyte would pull out so he could go directly into a bigger, more lucrative fight with Fury, and then lo and behold, he injures his shoulder. Seems like quite a coincidence to me. Whyte insists it was legit. He said, why would he have a full camp set up, including bringing in his sparring partners and then, weasel out of the fight, which I guess on some level makes sense. He said it was just one of those injuries. Again, I don't know what to think. I'll say this, though. I do understand his desire to go into a fight with Fury for obvious reasons, but then again, a deal is a deal.
Yeah, my thing is, one, they won't allow Wallin's team to examine the injury or have an independent doctor review it. And, more importantly, if it was a legitimate injury, why not postpone? Why is the fight being canceled? If it's not because you want to go straight into Tyson Fury, then, just reschedule the fight for a later date and get it on. But obviously, that's not what they want to do. But I feel like this is, part and parcel of, I feel like there's a myth of Dillian Whyte, who's a very, very good fighter, but it's always, I think he just wants the title shot. There was that whole campaign about he was the mandatory challenger, even though he wasn't. He was for a short period, but they made it seem like he was the mandatory for 1,000 days or what have you, when he actually turned down a couple eliminators and so forth. So it's unfortunate that this happens to Otto Wallin, but nothing new in the sport of boxing. Enough on that. Let's move on to the PBC Fight of the Week. This Saturday, October 30th, PBC on Showtime is back as WBA World Welterweight Champion Jamal "Shango" James takes on unbeaten top contender Radzhab Butaev. And that's action from Park MGM in Las Vegas beginning at 10 p.m. Eastern Time on Showtime. Let's start here with the essentials.
Okay, let's do it. James, 27-1, 12 knockouts. Butaev, 13-0, 10 knockouts. They're both 5-0 in their last 5. James has 2 KOs, Butaev 3. Butaev's 5-0 does not include a no contest. Last fight for James was a unanimous decision over Thomas Dulorme in August of last year, which means he will have been out of the ring for some time. Butaev stopped Terry Chatwood in 3 rounds in December of last year. James has a 43% knockout ratio, Butaev 93%. James 173 professional rounds, Butaev 57. James is 33, Butaev 27. James turned pro 2010, Butaev 2016. They both fight from an orthodox stance. Interesting dimensions here. James 6'2", 5'10.5" for Butaev, but Butaev actually has a longer reach. James 70-inch reach, Butaev 72. As we know, James is from Minneapolis, and Butaev is a Brooklyn-based Russian.
Well, we've got the essentials, but what more can you tell us about Butaev?
Okay, Butaev has had only 13 pro fights, as I said, but reportedly had an amateur record of 392-8, which means, if that's accurate, which means he has a ton of experience, at least from the amateur side. He's a good boxer, but he's not a shrinking violet in there. He fights with intelligent aggression, from what I could tell. He's also a good counterpuncher when he needs to be, and he has some pop in his punches. On top of that, he's 27 years old, as I mentioned. He's at his physical peak. This isn't a matter of just plucking a guy from Europe to be an easy mark for James. From what I could tell, from what I hear and read, Butaev is a genuine threat to James.
So stylistically, how can we expect this fight to play out?
I think Butaev is going to be the aggressor most of the time, meaning he's going to be moving forward. James will stand his ground more than enough to get the attention of Butaev and the judges, but I expect him to stick and move, which could end up frustrating Butaev. This formula could lead to success for James if he's able to maintain it.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much his calling card. What does a win here mean for James?
James is on the cusp of fighting for a full title. He's not far away from that. Maybe he gets the winner of the projected fight between Yordenis Ugas and Imantas Stanionis for the WBA title, although nothing is set there as far as I understand it. Bottom line, James has to win this fight or all his plans go out the window. So it's a big night for him.
Yeah, hugely important night in my opinion. Lots on the line here. And with that, let's get our predictions going. Who you got?
So I envision a fight in which James does more than enough work from a defensive posture to win a decision, sort of like Alexander Besputin did against Butaev in 2009. Real quick, Besputin won a clear decision against Butaev, but the result was changed to a no contest after Besputin tested positive for a banned substance. So he did lose the fight, but it's a no contest. I think Butaev's best hope in this fight is to break James down and have a strong second half of the fight, possibly even stopping James. I just don't believe he's going to do that. James is too slick, too athletic for Butaev. I think he outboxes the Russian and has his hand raised in the end.
Yeah, I agree with you. And he's got a lot of dog in him as well, Jamal James, that is. So even in those rough moments, I expect that he will know how to handle himself. I'm going with James, unanimous decision, just an excellent boxer. And I expect he will use his length and reach to keep Butaev at bay. Now in the co-feature, rising welterweight sensation, the undefeated Jaron Boot Ennis takes on veteran Thomas Dulorme. Mike, what are your thoughts on this matchup?
I think this is a good opponent for Ennis. I asked him if this is the toughest test, and he said no. He said that Lipinets was more difficult, at least on paper. This is a test, though, particularly after the effort Dulorme gave against James. He came. He looked like he was ready for that fight. Tried really hard. I think he acquitted himself fairly well in that fight. So I like the matchup. This is a good little stepping stone for Ennis.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a good barometer. I also think it's a dangerous fight. We saw Dulorme versus Jamal James. James won clearly, but it was a very tough fight for him. Yep. Dulorme had several moments, and he gave Imantas Stanionis a pretty spirited effort too. What does a win here mean for Ennis?
It's another step toward becoming a star. You know how I feel about Ennis. I honestly believe that he's the most talented fighter, just in pure talent, most talented guy in the world. So this is just another step for him to sort of realize his destiny. Fighters as gifted as Ennis usually take things one step at a time. He's at a stage now where he's fighting guys who are maybe just below the top tier, which is where Dulorme is. If Ennis wins, then he's that much closer to fighting the big boys, where he can really prove how good he is. So in that sense, this is a big fight for him.
Well, in your opinion, how far away is he though from fighting for a world title?
I think he's ready yesterday. I think he's definitely ready now. The question is whether he can get one of the title holders into the ring, which is tricky. I think at the moment he might be too big a risk for too little gain for these guys because of his ability, which I think is, again, through the roof. And the fact he's still building his name. So he doesn't have quite the drawing. He has the ability, but not quite the drawing powder. So, like, why fight him? Why take the chance? So I think his best course right now might be just to continue to win, look impressive as you do it. And then at some point you just force everybody's hand. I mean, they're going to have to fight him eventually.
Yeah, and I think he's super close now. Who do you like?
Well, I don't know whether I'd pick anybody in the world to beat Ennis, who I think is the best young fighter on the planet when you combine his skills and his power. And his athleticism. So I'm definitely going to go with Ennis here. I think Delorme will come to fight as he did in those fights that we mentioned. And I think he'll give a decent account of himself for a while. But I think he's eventually going to get overwhelmed by Ennis's speed, his power, and he's got on top of everything, he's got this killer instinct. And I think he's gonna stop him. I'm going to say KO 7.
Yeah, you know what? Delorme hasn't been stopped since 2015, and like you, I expect Duran Boots Ennis to pull it off. Give me Ennis by 10th round TKO in a spirited, very good fight. Now, one quick note. The televised opener features unbeaten lightweight contender Michel Rivera taking on Jose Matias Romero in a 10-round bout. Also, updated standings for our prediction league. My record is 28-6-3. Mike is 26-8-3. It's heating up as the year winds down. And with that, it's time for our first guest. He is a 2-time world champion. And on Saturday, November 6th, he faces Marcos Hernandez as the co-feature on the Canelo Alvarez-Caleb Plant headliner on Showtime pay-per-view, the dog, Anthony Dirrell. Anthony, how has camp been for this fight?
It's been great. I've been out here in Vegas since third, so it's been going great. No injuries. I know everybody, pretty much say, their camp is one of the best, but it's been a good camp. It's been like a really good camp, so I'm really happy of where we at right now.
That's great. Now, your opponent, Marcos Hernandez, he's coming off a huge upset win over Jose Resendez. Did you watch that fight? And if so, what were your thoughts on Hernandez?
I haven't watched the fight yet. I haven't watched any of his fights, honestly.
Is that something you normally do?
If I do, it's a couple rounds. I can generally get a feel for somebody within a couple rounds of what they do and their mistakes and their, what their go-to move is. But I don't think that's my job. I think that's the coach's job. I think we do, like I say, have to look at them, to see what their, like I said, their weaknesses and their strong points are. But I'm prepared to fight anybody. I'm prepared. I prepare the same way for everybody, and that won't change because of opponent.
It's obviously a big platform, given what's in the main event. Are you looking to make a statement here? Stand out?
I always want to make a statement. I always want to be in there and be the best fighter that's on that fight card. I think, would that be hard? Yeah. But, I'm up for the task. I'm up for the challenge, for sure.
Well, Anthony, in the main event, Canelo Alvarez takes on Caleb Plant to crown the first ever undisputed super middleweight world champion. Who do you like in that fight?
I'm not even going to talk about it. It doesn't even matter. I'm focused on my fight. I can care less about that fight. If we can get that fight going, I can have a winner of that fight, then I'll talk about it. But for now, I'm focused on my guy.
Got it. Go ahead, Ken.
Well, I do have to ask, though, do you think Caleb can pull off the upset, or it seems everyone seems to have the same opinion?
I don't know what Caleb can do. You got to ask Caleb that question. It's not up to me.
Now, you mentioned getting the winner of that fight. Do you think that's likely, being that, you are one of the top guys at 168. You are fighting in the chief support. Are you eyeing the winner immediately after your fight?
Hopefully. I'm 37 years old. I'm one of the oldest at the top of the 168 pound division, and you know, as everybody know, I don't have too much longer in this game. But it's that's one of the fights that I would want to happen. If it don't happen, I don't know what I'll do next, honestly. Either if I'll retire or I'll just fight again. But that's one of the fights that I will want next for sure.
So if big opportunities don't present themselves anytime soon, you'd actually consider walking away.
Yeah, because there's no point in me fighting still. I don't think it's nothing. If I don't get that fight, I'll be, like I say, 38 probably before if I was to get the fight, if it don't happen next. So I mean, I'm older. I got, it's more revenues in this world other than boxing to make money. Not saying that I need it, but it's better, you know, if I close a chapter and then open another chapter, because boxing is not the only way to survive. I mean, you got to have other avenues, and you know, I'm setting myself up for that. You know, everything has to come to an end at some point. It all depends on when you want to do it. And like I say, if that fight doesn't happen, I'll consider it for sure. It'd be a strong possibility.
You just mentioned how great camp went. I'm guessing that you'd miss it, though. I mean, I guess anybody who's competed at your level would miss it. But what are your feelings about that?
I'll miss boxing? Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I'll close the chapter. It happens. Everybody, you know, I'll probably miss the competition. I guess that's about it. Camp, I really wouldn't miss it because I'll be with my family. But it's something we all have to do. We all have to put, you know, the thing that we love or like down and start something new. And that's, you know, and that's the plan. That's what we get ourselves ready for, especially in this game. You know, we don't go long. Basketball players can go for a lot longer. Some football players can go a lot longer. Baseball players can go forever. Golfers, you know, you can golf till you can't walk anymore. So, but boxing, it's different. You get hit, you take head trauma, you take wear and tear in your body, and you know, you want to preserve that, especially if you have something, you know, in the works for like I said, the next chapter. Either that's boxing or commentating or anything. I mean, you have to close one chapter to open another one, and you can't keep going back and forth because you won't give the next chapter 100%.
Is it different? I mean, we saw your last fight, obviously, against Karan Davis, was young, motivated, and came in with a great game plan. Yet, you know, you still look good. Your timing wasn't off. You landed. Yeah, he
didn't win that fight.
Yeah, you were landing great counters.
I know that.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, but it still comes a time in your life. Like I say, I can't do this forever. I can't get in. You know, that's like us going up against young people every fight. You know. Yeah. At some point in time, you know, Father Time never loses, and that's proven, especially in this sport. So, you know, I want to get out with all my wits. You know, I don't want any brain trauma or head trauma. I want to get out and still knowing the things that I know now about boxing.
Now, you mentioned you would, you know, stick around obviously for the big fight. What if another big fight presented itself, a Gennady Golovkin or Jamal Charlo or something like that? Would you be interested in one of those fights, or is it just the Canelo Plant winner?
I want a championship. I want a championship.
Yeah.
I want a championship. I want to go out with a championship. I want to go out as a winner. I want to go out as a champion. And I think that's what, you know, a lot of people want to do. I don't think, and like I say, Benavidez' fight will be good, but no belts is nothing. We're fighting for nothing. At the end of the day, you can say bragging rights, or you can say, for your respect or whatnot, but it's nothing. Us as boxers, we want to be champion, and I think everybody agrees with that. And we want the person that come as a champion. So, that's where I will want to be. That's where I will want to be. Head myself into if I do get the big fight. Being champion.
So you can see yourself winning a title and then just walking away.
Ward did it. Why can't anybody else do it?
Floyd did it. Yeah.
Floyd did it. I mean, it's a lot of people that did it. So, but
Earl Frutch,
Lennox Lewis.
We look at everybody, like we're obligated to stay in this just because we're champion, and we're not. We go in here with the attitude that, we're going to win, and it's our decision on what we want to do, not nobody else's. I don't think anybody else can talk me into doing something that I don't want to do. If I want to retire, I'm going to retire. If I want to keep going, I'm going to keep going. That's just as simple as that. And like I say, I'm 37 years old, man. I'm one of the oldest at the, especially in the top 5, top 10. So it comes a time in a place where you gotta hang it up, and the big shot is there. It's if I can get it or not.
Back to the fight a little bit, if we could. So you mentioned your age. You're 37. You're still involved at the highest level, in spite of what we've been talking about. Have you had to adjust the way you train as you've gotten older? Or is it pretty much the way you've trained your whole career?
It's the same. It's the same. I still train the same. I still do the same things. Not going to lie, it's a little harder to lose the weight. I'm getting older, as men, we get older and the weight kind of sticks on us.
I can relate.
I understand that.
That's the nature of life. That's how it goes. But it's coming off fairly easy this camp. It's surprising. And I'm fine. I'm in shape right now. I'm ready to go. And like I said, I'll be ready. Well, I'll be ready, November 6th.
You're always ready. What about recovery? I know older guys have said that recovery is a little bit more difficult. Have you noticed that?
My last fight, it wasn't too bad, honestly. I think the fight with Benavidez, it was just a cut that was
right.
It recovered. It recovered good, but I mean, I can't say I had any problems recovering because I really take care of my body. Because I don't, like I say, I'm not the person that goes out and drink and get shit faced. I'm not that guy. I don't smoke. I don't drink. And I will have a drink occasionally. But I don't think that'll hurt none. I'm not going to sit here and get drunk where I don't even know what's going on. So I take care of my body, and my body take care of me. So I think that's the big thing, taking care of your body, for sure.
This is kind of a big question. Be curious to see what you say. What would you say are the biggest lessons you've learned from being a boxer for so long?
Just don't take nothing for granted. Live in the moment. Live, train hard, because if you don't, it'll show. And that's the advice that I have for the younger generation. You can't. Boxing is not a game. Boxing is serious, and you have to give boxing 100%. You can't give it 50 or 75-25. You have to give it 100%. You have to make sacrifices to get to where you want to be, and that's the main thing, the sacrifices part. Because I think every champion can tell you they made sacrifices to get to where they're at right now.
Anthony, do you keep up with the sport in terms of the younger fighters? Are there any young fighters out there that you sort of watch and you look at and go, wow, that, I can see this person being special? I'm just thinking about the advice you just gave right now.
I do. I look at. I'm a boxer. I watch boxing. Don't matter who fights. I watch it. I don't know why, but I just do. I love seeing, people making and people that they say can't do it, do it. That makes me happy because they fought against all odds to, be the person that they are right now at that moment.
Who do you think of when you think of a fighter like that?
I think of myself too, because they said I couldn't, win a championship. I won two. They say I couldn't. They say I wouldn't fight certain people. I did. But everybody has their own story, man. It's how you want to tell your story is the main thing. But I see myself in a lot of these fighters. I even learn stuff off of fighters. They're younger, they're faster than we was. I don't know. They're younger and faster than we was. Growing up. I think their speed and their power is different. Put it that way.
Anthony, you already mentioned you were two-time world champion. You've had a great career. You've overcome so much. Is it just another world title that keeps you going, that keeps you motivated for more?
Just implanting my name in the history books. Just showing, I guess, my kids that, their dad, is somebody.
Yeah, well, your name's already in the history books, Anthony. Thank you so much for taking out the time to do this. Looking forward to seeing you back in the ring on November 6th and hoping you're victorious and you get that big shot.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, it's time for the week in review. Last Saturday, undefeated former featherweight champ Shakur Stevenson turned in the finest performance of his career, no question. Stevenson won nearly every second of every round against Jamel Herring. He stopped Herring in 10 rounds and snatched away his WBA 130-pound title to become a two-division champion. Mike, what did you think of Stevenson's performance?
That was special stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I thought Herring would make it competitive, but he really didn't. The champ was schooled by the kid. Stevenson's combination of speed and ability is just flat out scary. And it wasn't like he boxed carefully or anything like that. He stood his ground, and I thought he got the better of Herring, both outside, inside, everywhere they could possibly be. It turns out that Stevenson's also tougher than I realized, in addition to being so gifted. I was trying to think of someone to compare him to, and I know I got to be careful with this, but I just kept thinking, as I'm watching this, I just kept thinking Floyd Mayweather. They have different styles, obviously, but he reminded me of Floyd in terms of the way he just completely outclassed and then shut down a world-class opponent like Floyd did so many times in his career. I still think that Boots Ennis and Gervonta Davis, for the record, has a higher ceiling than Stevenson because of the power factor. But man, it's hard to imagine anybody beating Shakur Stevenson.
Yeah, he looked great. I mean, he did everything he needed to do, and he also stepped up to get the stoppage, and he was a lot more aggressive than we've seen in the past. Mm-hmm. I don't love the Floyd comparison. I've seen it a lot. But no question, you saw the talent that's led many to believe he's a future pound for pounder. What about Herring? Where does he go from here?
I think Herring's had a good career. He's a late bloomer. He overcame losses 2016, 2017 to become a world champion at 33, which is kind of late. And he successfully defended 3 times. I think of him as a guy who got the most out of his potential, which is all that we can ask from fighters and all they can ask from themselves. It appears to me that he's hit a ceiling. There's no point continuing, I think, at 35. It'd be the perfect time for him to walk away right now.
Yeah, I mean, he can still be competitive against some other 130-pound contenders. Really, he's overachieved, quite a bit already. If he does decide to continue fighting, I think he should consider moving up. I mean, he's older. He's fought at 135 before. I think he can do it again. But what about Stevenson? What's next for him?
Well, he's called out Oscar Valdez, which makes perfect sense. They each own a 130-pound title, and they fight for the same promoter, meaning that it's possible they can get a title unification bout. I just don't see why that wouldn't happen. Then it would be on to 135, which presents all kinds of amazing possibilities. You know, I'd love to see Stevenson fight guys like Tank Davis and Teofimo Lopez and Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney. Can you imagine just this big round robin with all these gifted guys? Then we'd really know. I obviously the Valdez would be a test, but if after he gets through all these things that I just mentioned, then we'd really know how good Stevenson. I mean, I think he's really good now, but I want to see how this plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. All those guys, really. I mean, but I would love to see the Oscar Valdez fight next. It makes the most sense, although it looks like they're sort of steering Valdez toward Emmanuel Navarrete if Navarrete moves up. But the unification versus Valdez should be the next big fight for both. All right, it's time to bring in our next guest, a former track star who has become one of the finest strength and conditioning coaches in the game. He'll be in the corner of 168-pound world champion Caleb Plant when Plant faces Canelo Alvarez November 6th on Showtime pay-per-view. And you'll see his face on the screen a lot more as we get into some big fights in the near future. None other than Larry Wade. Larry, first, to give our listeners an idea of your background, you were once one of the best 110-meter hurdlers in the world. You did make it to the Olympics in part because of some bad luck, but you had a very good career. What do you think of when you look back on your track career?
You know what? It's funny you asked me that question because for years, you know, I would have a lot of thoughts in why I was having the injuries and the issues that I had coming up to the sport. And for the longest period of time, I was thinking, you know, just bad luck for me to have all these different issues happen, right? But to be honest with you now, in retrospect, I was going through those things so I could have knowledge and information to be able to pass on to the people that I'll end up working with, you know, down the line. Because a lot of those lessons I learned, a lot of that experience actually helped me become a better coach. And so I'm grateful that I went through those things because without them, who's to say if I would be at the quality or the level of coach that I am today?
All right. Now, when did you decide you wanted to get into coaching?
Coaching or boxing?
Coaching.
You know what? It wasn't one of those things that I just decided, hey, I'm going to do it. What happened for me was I had a friend who needed help, who I loved. His name is Dominicano, and he needed a coach. And I decided, okay, since he's my friend, I'm going to help him. And it just so happened the first year I coached him, he made the world championship team, got a six-figure contract from Nike. And then within my second year coaching him, he got to the world championships, got a medal at the world championships, and also broke the world record in the hurdles. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm pretty good at this thing. Maybe there's something to it. So that's kind of how it happened. It was out of necessity of me trying to help someone. It wasn't a matter of me saying, hey, this is what's going to happen. And then I got a few more opportunities after that, you know, being a national coach for Saudi Arabia, things of that nature. And they did really, really well. And I was like, okay, clearly this is what God wants me to do. So I trusted it, and there we go.
Excellent. So tell us then, how did you get into boxing?
Yeah, you know, it's funny is I kind of got into the pro training. And so I was pro track first, where I did really, really well. You know, sent multiple people to the Olympic Games, to the World Championship to get medals from gold to bronze. And then I got kind of brought into the NFL route through some NFL scouts who wanted me to train some of the NFL players for speed. And then through that connection, ended up doing NBA and pro basketball players like Gilbert Arenas and things of that nature. And then it just so happened I was working with Gilbert Arenas at this moment, and he took that week off. And so I went to Las Vegas to visit my wife and my kid, Yvonne Wade, and she's also a two-time Olympian. And I went to visit her. She was the coach at the university there. And as I'm at the university visiting her at the track, I see these two guys working on the track. Had no idea who they were at the time. One looked really, really intimidating. And the other one looked really athletic, right? Like a football player. I go and introduce myself, and I say, hey, I'm Larry Wade. And he says, hey, I'm Kenny Porter. This is my son, Shawn Porter.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. I said, he looks like a football player. He said he played football at one time. I said, oh, okay. He said, but he's a boxer now. And I was like, oh, okay. We passed information. I gave him my card. Next thing I know, he called me 2 weeks later, asked me if I could work with his son on strength conditioning. I said, absolutely. And it just so happened that, you know, he loved the workout, asked me if I wanted to be part of a camp. I wasn't 100% sure what a camp was at the time, to be honest with you. And so what he said to me was, can you get guys in shape? I said, that's what I do. And he said, okay, this is what I would like to do. I'm going to bring you into our camp. I'm going to teach you the boxing side of things, and then you can use your knowledge and experience, for the strength conditioning side. So for a year and a half, going on 2 years, I went to the gym every day for free just so I could learn the intricate parts of what boxing was and how I could apply, my strength conditioning, knowledge to it. And so 4 months later, after starting to work with Shawn Porter, he ended up becoming the world champion. I didn't take another solo client for almost a year and a half, and then I ended up getting Badou Jack, and we won some more titles with him. And so here I am now, 9 years or going into 9 years later, and I got 8 world titles.
Great stuff. So you've worked with athletes from multiple sports, as you've just said.
Absolutely.
Are boxers any different from the rest?
100% different. This is what I tell young trainers. If you get an opportunity to work with a boxer, please take the time to actually dedicate yourself to go to the gym constantly so you can learn that genetically and how they have to function is totally different than a football player, totally different than a basketball player. I'll give you a prime example. In Newton's third law of motion, it said for every action has an equal and opposite reaction. In most cases, that applies to every sport. But in boxing, when you throw a jab, you usually throw the same leg that's standing out front. So if you throw your left, if you're an orthodox fighter and you jab with your left arm, you're actually moving your left leg. So you have to learn how to see things differently in order to apply it. And not only that, you have to also know from a physiological standpoint that too much muscle can be a hindrance, can actually go work against the boxer, opposed to, say, a running back in the NFL or something along those lines. So to me, it falls in line with track and field, because in the sport of track and field, also, if you got too much muscle, the same thing can happen. It slows you down. So it wasn't that hard to align those two up. It was just a matter of getting the experience from a boxing standpoint to connect my knowledge and experience to it.
So I'm reading between the lines, but it sounds like it's something that you've really enjoyed.
Man, I love it. I was telling Shawn Porter today, and I try to tell him quite often, nobody loves their job as much as I love my job. I love what I do. This month, the month of November marks my 19th month straight being in camps and working with no breaks. 19 months. In December, it's right now scheduled to be my last fight, and that'll be 20 months straight. Now, for me, most people are like, hey, coach, you should be tired. I'm not. And the reason I'm not is because each person is a different Rubik's Cube, for lack of words. It's a different person, a different situation, different set of emotion, a different set of coaches. And you have to be able to figure out the right plan for that person to be successful based on the dynamic of the camp and their development place or location at that time. Because one person maybe developed at to one level, and then other person may not. So you can't train them the same. You can not only not train them the same for that reason, but you can't train them the same because everybody has a different body type. You got mesomorph, endomorph, and ectomorph frames, so you cannot possibly train your heavyweight like you may train your featherweight. So you have to know the different dynamics with that as well. So no, but I love my job.
I can imagine. So you kind of alluded a little bit to this, but how do workouts for boxers compare to, let's say, workouts for track athletes?
They're hard. What? Let me say this. Both track and boxing have very challenging training regimens. But boxers have to be able to perform for basically 36 minutes straight, 12 rounds. Hardly ever in the sport of track and field does anyone have to perform for that long. 100 meters is 9 seconds, right? 200 meters is 19 seconds. 400 meters is 43, 42 seconds. 800 meters is a minute and 42 seconds. Only time you get those kind of numbers when you start running marathons and things of that nature.
Yeah.
So being able to train someone, if you see a marathoner, they're usually relatively thin, not a lot of muscle mass, so they can go long periods of time. Well, in boxing, these guys aren't thin. They actually have, muscle tone to be able to be explosive and powerful. So you got to be able to balance it and understand how one type of training will get you one type of result and a different type of training will get you another. So you got to find something right there in the middle.
Now, boxers, well, aside from heavyweights, have to make weight, right? Was it difficult to incorporate that factor into your training regimen?
You know what? No, that wasn't the difficult part. To me, the difficult part is and was being able to bring in new concepts into the sport of boxing. When you're in the sport of boxing, a lot of time what happens is the old school way of doing the cut weight was, just don't feed them and don't give them water and the weight's going to come off. It's also going to kill them too. So you learn how to cut weight more efficiently without starving them and letting their muscle become catabolic. When the muscle becomes catabolic, they basically start to eat at each other. And then what happens is you don't recover as fast, you're not as explosive. So they'll look good for maybe the first 4 rounds, but then after that, you run into problems, right? Because you didn't feed your muscles for weeks in order to get the weight off.
Yeah, it makes sense to me now why Shawn never gets tired.
Yeah, so being able to cut weight in the right way is really, really important. And if you mess that up, then you're going to see it at some point or another.
Right. So Larry, our listeners might not have an idea of what type of things a boxer might do with a fitness coach. I don't expect you to lay out your whole program, but can you give us a quick description of like a typical workout, just a few things that you actually might do with a fighter?
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to express, since I have opportunity to talk about it, is this. The strength conditioning coach is the assistant to the lead trainer.
Right.
Whatever the lead trainer does and wants to do, that's the number one priority, right? So if he wants to spar, like there's some trainers that want to spar once a week, there's some trainers that want to spar twice a week, and there's some trainers that want to spar 4 times a week. You can only get so much energy out of an athlete, period. So if they're giving 90% of their energy for the day to the trainer, you only got 10% to work with. And you have to figure out how to maximize that 10% to help that athlete at that time in camp. Because in camp, there's a different type of training at every phase of camp, even leading into the fight the last 2 weeks, right? So you have to be able to do that. So in general, if I give you a general outline, if a guy is sparring that day, and it's not a hard spar, it's 9 times out of 10, I'm going to want to do some form of strength and conditioning, all right? Now, when I say strength and conditioning, I mean ability to generate and create more force, which is typically a functional movement type of strength or weights, right?
Okay.
And so it's such a let's say a facade that people believe, or a lie that people believe that you're not supposed to lift weights when you are a boxer. That's so not true. That's so old school. It's all about understanding when and why, right? So can lifting weights restrict your movement? Sure, it can, but you have to know when to do it and why you're doing it. So if a guy is doing sparring that day, there's a better chance or a higher chance of me doing some kind of strength work with him. If a guy's not sparring that day and he's just having a gym workout, then there's a better chance that I'm going to do some type of anaerobic or aerobic type of training to get his fitness up. Either way, we're going to need all that stuff when it comes time for the fight.
Interesting stuff. Now, had you been a fan of boxing at all before you got involved in the sport?
You know what? I got boxing was forced on me as a kid, to be honest with you.
Okay.
My grandfather he's from San Antonio, and if you know anything about Texas or the Hispanic culture, boxing is huge. And there are a lot of people of Latin descent living in San Antonio. And so we watch boxing all the time. I mean, my grandfather would have me watch boxers we would never see nationally, but will fight locally. And I would watch boxing all day long from I'm going to say the age of 5 all the way until, I graduated. And at age 5, I don't want to watch boxing. I want to watch cartoons. But that was not an option at my grandparents' house at all. You're watching boxing, and I'm going to tell you why this guy's going to win, and I'm going to tell you why that guy's going to lose. That was kind of how it was for us.
Now, what was it like to be in the corner or at least in the arena for your first boxing match? I mean, are you addicted now? It sounds like you are.
I was addicted from the first opportunity. I was so excited about performance. I was so excited about me being able to, give some of my knowledge and some of my experience to someone and actually seeing it unfold in a ring, kind of like an artist would on his canvas. It's the most beautiful thing and the most beautiful opportunity you could ever experience, to be able to say you were part of something that was bigger than yourself and you was able to help somebody else develop. That's beyond great for me. I don't think there's anything else that could be more empowering, in my opinion, to be able to be part of someone's growth and their development, and that growth and development be able to change their lives and everybody's lives around them. That is huge.
How much have you learned about the technical side of boxing, the fundamentals of the sport?
Oh my God. I don't know how to describe that, because I don't know if there's a percentage that I can express as far as the totality of knowledge that can and should be learned. But I will tell you this: I've learned so much and I learned so much in that first 2 years that it was amazing. That Kenny Porter, after I was with him for a year and a half, he was adamant about me getting my boxing coaching certification, right? Not strength conditioning, but boxing coaching. And I was like, nah, that's not really what I want to do. I'm in love with this. And he's like, yeah, you may not want to do it, but I think it's going to be helpful for you to be able to say you're a certified coach as well if you want to train. I said, all right. So for a year and a half, we talk about it, but we didn't never do anything. And then he paid for me to actually get it done, right? Out of his own money, set it up. And I went to take the test. And this is a true story. I went to take my boxing coaching certification. I did not study the test at all. Now, mind you, it was open book, but I didn't know it was open book. And I went there, there's probably like 50 of us, right? They go through like a little small summary of what we should know. They give us the test. I finished my test first. I walked to turn my test in, but as I'm walking to the front, I was starting to feel insecure, because I'm like, why am I finished so soon? Either I got it right or I got them all wrong. I said, let me go back and double check them again. So I went back, double checked them a second time. And by this time, maybe 3 people had turned theirs in. I turned mine in. They make us wait till everybody turns their in, and they grade it right in front of us. Yeah. Right? I was the only person at about 50, and I made 100. And here's the thing. I made 100. I didn't even study. I took all the information that I had learned with Kenny Porter over the last year and a half, and it gave me the information enough so I could make 100 on the test.
Wow.
So maybe
so that's to tell you that. Hopefully they give you some kind of insight on how much I've learned.
Yeah.
Maybe your grandfather played a role in that too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I can't take that away from him either.
Right. So you've worked with a growing number of big name boxers, as we've talked about here: Shawn Porter, Butaev, Luis Ortiz, Caleb Plant, Rolando, Romero, to name a few. 3 of these guys, Porter, Plant, Romero, will be taking part in pay-per-view bouts in the next month. So I'm guessing things are just absolutely crazy busy right now.
A little bit.
I can't even explain it to you, but you know what? I'm grateful because God has given me the energy, the focus, the knowledge to continue to do it and do it at a high level and be excited about doing it every day, And they all have schedules that actually work in regards to me being able to accommodate everybody, efficiently and fully. But that's really important. I would never want to shorten anyone. So it just so happened that they overlap just enough that about time one finishes, then the other one's just getting started. Caleb Plant fights in about 2 weeks. Rolly just started camp. So that being said, it doesn't really overlap that much, and it gives me a lot of time to still get everybody what they want.
That's great.
So let's start with to go through the 3 guys. Let's start with Caleb. What's it like working with him? How has camp been? And are you guys doing anything different for the Canelo Alvarez fight?
Camp has been great. He put in a lot of work this camp as far as getting prepared for it. I can't say that we've changed a lot of things. There have been some adjustments, but I can't really speak about those because every fight should be fight specific. But we have made some adjustments. But he's worked his butt off to get to this point right now, and I'm excited for him. I mean, this is the opportunity to show the world how good he really is.
What about Shawn? What can you tell us about his camp and his upcoming big fight?
Shawn is always dynamic. If you ever seen Shawn Porter fight, then you're going to get a lot of power, a lot of explosion, a lot of movement. And just training him is always exciting because you don't know what's the next move he's going to give you. He's going to give you something explosive and something powerful. And when you get a guy like Shawn Porter who's excited about who he's fighting, that's going to create something totally different. But he's working his butt off as well. And, we're trying to put the pieces up for a guy like Terrence Crawford because by no means are we taking him for granted. We understand he's a champion, so we're putting in a championship performance for him.
That's awesome. Now, last but definitely not least, Rolly is so famous for his persona. What is it like to work with him?
Fun is the key. I can say. When I first got Rolly, you know, I got a lot of people who gave me a lot of flack about it initially. Why are you working with that guy? He this and that. And you know what? When I started working with him, I realized he's just a kid, like anybody else. He's a kid, and his heart is pure. He has a great heart. He's a great kid as a person. What you guys see in Rolly is just the persona in which he has been, I'm gonna say for lack of a word, glorified in. But if you actually know Rolly, he has a great heart, and he works his butt off like anybody else. I've never had to fuss or get on him about doing the work. He'll do it exactly the way I want it done when I want it done. So he's just like any other champion that I've worked with. He puts in the effort, and that's why he's elevated himself to a space where he's at right now at 14 fights in pay-per-view. How many other athletes do you know in boxers, and maybe you guys know this better than I do, that only has 13, 14 fights and he's in a pay-per-view fight?
Can't think of too many.
I haven't seen anyone since I've been in the sport. Maybe I'm wrong though.
I can't, Mike. You think of any? I can't think of any.
So that
really.
clearly goes to tell you that his personality and his attitude has positioned him to be able to be in a pay-per-view fight with 14 fights.
That's awesome. It's impressive.
Which is huge.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that about him too. Last question for you, Coach. I mean, you reportedly have around a 90% winning percentage when it comes to the fighters that you've worked with. How much pride do you take in that?
You know what? I take pride in everything that I do and everyone that I work with. And the reason I do that is because we're not always promised another opportunity. And unfortunately, in the sports that we're in, you're only as good as your last fight. And you're only as good as your last opportunity. So I need every opportunity to be a performance where the next commentator and or the next athlete says, I want whoever's working with that guy did a great job, and I want my kids to work with him. That's more important to me than anything else. Because if you got that feeling, that means you trust me. If you trust me, that means I got an opportunity to train you beyond your own insecurities, and that's where real greatness comes from.
Yeah.
You can get past your own insecurities. You can get past your own obstacles that you put in front of you, and you allow somebody else to guide you. Now you got a chance to be great. And that's what I look forward to, those great moments. And when I say great moments, I'm not talking about great as in one day. I'm talking about great every day until there's someone says to us, we're anointed as the greatest. That's the goal. My only personal goal in life since I started in boxing is this, and most people may not like this. I want to be inducted into the Boxing Hall of Fame as the first strength conditioning coach to do it.
Love that.
Wow, that's awesome.
There's so many other great guys that I think have done a great job, but I'm going to openly say that's what I want. I want to be inducted in the Boxing Hall of Fame. And I know right now, even with 8 titles under my belt, it's not enough. Maybe if I get 30, they'll put me in there.
Man, you're well on your way, Coach.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I mean, can't wait to see what your fighters have in store. Thank you again for taking the time out to join us, and look forward to having you back on at some point in the future as well.
Absolutely. Whenever you guys want me, I'm here. Thank you guys for taking the time to interview me.
All right, it's time for Mike and I to go toe to toe. This week, we're examining the 5 greatest performances from Canelo Alvarez. Canelo, of course, will put his 3 belts on the line against undefeated IBF World Super Middleweight Champion Caleb Plant Saturday, November 6th on Showtime pay-per-view. And as always, we're going to go in ascending order. Mighty Mike will kick things off.
Okay, real quick. This was a little bit tricky. It wasn't as hard as some, but I think I could have come up with 7 or 8 that would have been legitimate choices, which I think says a lot about Canelo. When you have like 7 or 8 fights that you could describe as important or defining fights, and it says a lot about the fighter. Anyway,
Yeah.
I landed on this guy for number 5, Daniel Jacobs. I believe this fight has to be considered one of Alvarez's best victories because Jacobs wasn't at any distinct disadvantages as far as I remember. An elite guy, an experienced fighter. He was in his prime, and he was a legitimate middleweight. And Alvarez beat him fair and square, although I think it was a close, competitive fight. I don't know if people overlook this victory, but I see it as an impressive one that added to my respect that I already had for Alvarez.
Yeah, it certainly was an impressive victory. I think one of the better wins on his resume. Interestingly enough, it doesn't make my list because I was sort of looking at pretty much what blew me away. What was the most impressive win? But I think certainly when you look at overall resume, that one ranks pretty high up there. My number 5 is the Josecito Lopez bout, which occurred in September 2012. Canelo stopped Lopez in 5 rounds. Now, Lopez was probably too small to be campaigning at 154 pounds to where Canelo was the WBC champ at the time. But he would have given a lot of fighters hell that night. But Canelo was simply masterful. We got a glimpse of the kind of complete fighter that we see now, the combinations, the speed, the power, the head movement, the ring IQ. Everything was on display that night. Canelo, 22 years old, looking like a pound for pounder.
Yeah, the reason that wouldn't be on my list is the reason that you mentioned. That Josecito slow. But we talk about guys who have dog in him. That dude's got serious dog in him, and he's gonna fight his heart out every time he steps through the ropes. I thought about including fights like that, and one that popped into my head was James Kirkland. I didn't go with that one either for a different reason. I just don't think Kirkland's ability is at the same level as the guys that I chose. But in terms of the domination and the way that Canelo looked in those fights is just through the roof. But I went with guys who actually had a chance, who I thought had a chance to beat him.
Interesting. Who's your number 4?
My number 4 is Austin Trout, April 20th, 2013. You have to remember that Trout at that time was undefeated and coming off a conclusive victory over Miguel Cotto. He was hot at that time. He's a tough, crafty southpaw, which had to be a concern for the handlers of Alvarez, who's only 22 years old. Well, in the end, there was nothing really to worry about. The kid controlled the fight, put Trout down in the 7th round and won a wide decision. It was competitive, but I think it was from my perspective, it was a clear decision. I think he took a sizable step in that fight in terms of the way he was perceived. Of course, it also led to the fight with Floyd Mayweather, and we know what happened there.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think you went with sort of resume in terms of his best performances, where I just eyeballed it and looked at the most amazing performances. I mean, my next one also made the cut, but didn't make yours. And my number 4, James Kirkland, a heavy hitter, although this was pretty one-sided. It was a dominant performance from Canelo. He scored a picture-perfect knockdown in round 1 and 2 more picture-perfect knockdowns in the 3rd round. The finale, a beautiful right cross that detonated on Kirkland's jaws. Just another highlight reel KO on a resume full of them. And sort of added to the lure of Canelo Alvarez. I think that was a huge fight at the time. I believe it took place in Texas. And for Canelo to knock out Kirkland in that fashion, a warrior in Kirkland, was very impressive.
Yeah, I think you used the perfect term. It's sort of a highlight reel win. I mean, that was just a breathtaking performance by Alvarez. But it was like feeding the lions, feeding the Christians to the lions kind of thing. It was like oh my God, I felt bad for Kirkland before the opening bell rang, and then look what happened. Really an exciting performance though. Really added to the reputation of Canelo.
I'll do my number 3 first, and it is Miguel Cotto. November 2015, the vacant WBC middleweight strap on the line against a legend in Cotto, who, by the way, fought an excellent fight that night. This was a high-speed boxing match full of traps and counters, and Canelo was simply better, winning a unanimous decision in a fight I believe that he learned a lot from, Mike.
Yeah, you know what? The Cotto fight was I'm actually looking up his record because I want to get this right. That was like my number 6, I think. And the reason that I didn't choose him was because he had lost back-to-back fights to Mayweather and Trout not too long before that. Actually, it was a couple years. And it just seemed like he was a little bit over the hill to me. But I did consider that because the guy's a future Hall of Famer, I hope. And that was a really big win, an important win on his resume. So that almost made my list.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that whatever he had left, he brought all of it to the ring.
Yeah, he did.
that night against Canelo. Now, have you listed your number 3 yet?
I haven't said my number 3 yet, but I will.
What you got?
Number 3 for me is Sergey Kovalev, November 2nd, 2019. Now, I hate the fact that Alvarez didn't give Kovalev as much time as he needed to prepare for the fight. He didn't have like a full camp, and it came too close to his previous fight in terms of the timing. But I still think this fight was a big risk for Alvarez. Kovalev is a light heavyweight, was getting older, but he was still formidable. And again, naturally much bigger than, or at least bigger than Alvarez. Remember, Canelo had fought only once at 168 before that fight.
Right.
It was a hard fight for Alvarez. The fight was essentially even after 10 rounds, at least on the scorecards. But Alvarez got the job done around 11. He stopped Kovalev in brutal fashion. I just liked the risk, and I liked the ending for Alvarez in that fight.
I did too, and that's why it's my number 2. I mean, look, Kovalev, as you said, he was a little long in the tooth, but it's how Alvarez beat him that impressed me. You know, Kovalev had a lot of success with his jab and his length, but Canelo was patient. He slowly broke him down, put him away for good with that beautiful combination in the 11th round. His composure really stood out to me. He just knew that the knockout would come, would go to the body. He landed well-placed shots, took his time, and then timed that ending perfectly with those 2 heavy shots upstairs. I was truly impressed with that win. That's my number 2.
So my number 2 is, we're going back a number of years to Erislandy Lara, July 12, 2014. Now, I know that Alvarez's advisors, at least some of them, did not want this fight. Lara was a super slick, awkward southpaw, learned cut his teeth in the Cuban amateur system. He had his only loss at that point was a controversial one to Paul Williams. And at that time, nobody really wanted to fight Paul Williams. Alvarez wanted the fight, though, and that was an early indication that he wasn't going to duck anyone, which I really admire. Alvarez got the decision in a close, competitive fight, even though some believe that Lara deserved the nod. I was just impressed, in part because Alvarez was only 2 fights removed from the drubbing he took against Mayweather, which is what it was. That obviously did not impact his development and his confidence. So I thought that was actually a pretty special performance from Alvarez.
It was an excellent fight. Great meeting of the minds, too, with Eddie Reynoso and Ronnie Shields. We had, Eddie on a couple weeks ago, and he discussed the possibility of facing Ronnie Shields again if they fight Jamal Charlo. It was just a brilliant fight that night. 2 great game plans, and truly there were no losers. Let's go to number 1. Should I go or
go for it?
All right. Well, my number 1 is his bout, Canelo's bout versus Gennady Golovkin, the rematch, September 2018 for the Unified Middleweight Championship. We heard a lot of talk about Golovkin fighting Mexican style, whatever that means, and standing and fighting with Canelo, who ran in the first fight, according to Canelo's according to Golovkin's oft-times not-so-bright trainer, Abel Sanchez. But look, in the rematch, Canelo stood his ground, backed Golovkin up, and that proved to be the difference to me. Golovkin was lumped up by round 4 and breathing heavily in the corner. However, he showed incredible heart and skill in battling back down the stretch and gave Canelo hell. I mean, this wasn't an easy win by any means for Canelo. It was a grueling back and forth, really one of the best fights I've seen in years, but Canelo won by decision in a fight that I believe took some juice out of Golovkin, and is also, in my opinion, the finest performance of Canelo's career.
Well, I agree. My number 1, Gennady Golovkin 2, September 9, 2018. You have to look at this fight in conjunction with the first one. They fought to a draw in the original, but most people believe that Triple G deserved the decision. That was a tough night for Alvarez. Still, he jumped right back into the ring with this Kazakhstani knockout artist, and a year later. And remember, he had a giant distraction going into that fight. The second fight was delayed because Alvarez tested positive for a PED and was suspended for 6 months, I guess it was. So that delayed the fight. Still, when it came time to fight, he did, what it took to have his hand raised against his arch rival. That was just a huge win for him.
Yeah, tremendous win for him. And I think he took something out of Golovkin that night, too. I don't know if Golovkin's ever been that good again. I thought it was a statement performance by Mr. Alvarez. Can't wait to see what he and Caleb Plant do Saturday, November 6th. We're getting super close to that date. Showtime pay-per-view. I cannot wait. That'll do it for this week's show. Be sure to like and subscribe to the PBC podcast and leave a comment if you so wish. We want to thank Anthony Dirrell and Larry Wade for joining us. We'll be back next week with more boxing talk, more interviews right here on the PBC podcast.